Reflections in Time is made possible in part by support from the UNO Alumni Association, fostering a legacy of alumni giving since 1913.
The interview series Reflections in Time was begun by the late Professor Paul Borghi more than 20 years ago. This new series continues Paul's work and is dedicated to his memory. My name is Jack Newton. I'm retired now, but I'm still active as a professor emeritus. I've been on the faculty of UN Omaha since 1960 and served for 20 years as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I worked closely with Professor Borghi in the development of his original interview series, and I can think of no more fitting tribute to him than to continue this work. We're here on a bright day in January, towards the end of January. It's a typical midwinter day in Omaha, January 26, 2001. Had a little snow this morning, and we have as a guest today Professor Bill Wakefield, who has been in the Department of Criminal Justice for a good many years now. Bill, welcome. It's nice to have you here with us.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. This is quite an honor to be included in this program.
We like to get all of the distinguished figures in the university's history as guests on this program.
I'm not too certain about the distinguished part, but
why don't you tell our audience how we first met? That was a good many years ago, back about when I first came here.
That's right. That was a long time ago. I came to UNO when I was just
Omaha
out of high
University
school.
back
Well,
then.
It was called Omaha University.
Right.
And, one of the first courses I took as a freshman was from you, and you were teaching in the psychology department, and I actually ended up taking 3 different courses, and we were just chatting briefly, and I actually remembered the titles of them, so you had quite an impact and an influence on me and my career at Omaha U. But the first 4 years that I was here was Omaha University, and I majored in psychology and sociology, but I actually came on a music scholarship.
Well, how did you happen to pick Omaha University?
Well, I had really intended to become a professional musician. I had already played drums. I'm a percussionist, and I was currently in the Omaha Symphony, playing with them at the time. And I had actually thought I would go to Berkeley University in Boston, which is a jazz school and one of the finest in the nation. And I thought, well, this will be wonderful. And I actually did have a chance at a scholarship, but it only paid for tuition, and I didn't have the means to live in Boston and go to school. So I came to UNO. They offered me a scholarship in music and to play in the band, major in music, and so that's how I ended up here at UNO.
Yeah, that was a few years ago too. Back in what, 1960, 61?
Well, I came here in 1961.
Yeah.
And my first year, and finished my bachelor's degree here at UNO with a major in psychology and sociology and actually music also, and which was a strange combination, but it seemed to work.
Yeah.
And then I went on for my master's degree here in sociology. And it was during that time is when they switched over to the University of Nebraska at Omaha in 1967, I believe it was. And I actually worked on the campaign to get that changed in the legislature. And,
well, we'll talk about those old days a little bit more later. But let's, before we do that, let's hear a little bit about you. You and I have known each other for a long time, but I don't think I've ever talked to you about your roots. I know you come from Omaha, but...
Right, I was born and raised right here in River City. And, grew up in north side of Omaha and went to North High School. I was a Viking, and it was quite interesting to see Paul Borghi, the pictures of Paul there. We used to do a lot of these interviews, but I actually met Paul when I was in high school.
Oh, really?
And he had an interest in North High. I think he had a relative there, maybe his kids or somebody were there. And he used to come to the talent shows they had, and I was always in the band or something. So when I actually came to UNO, or Omaha U at the time, we renewed our interest, and we kept that interest for many, many years. I've stayed most of my life in Omaha. I taught my first position after I graduated with my master's degree. In fact, I started teaching 2 days after I defended for my master's degree. Went to be a full-time teacher at Dana College in Blair, Nebraska, and I stayed there for 6 years. And I was teaching sociology, anthropology, social work. See, it was a small department. You covered a lot of bases. Right. Plus, I helped coach the swimming team and played in the band. So you had to do those things at a small college.
You know, you mentioned just now playing in the band, and you mentioned that a couple of times earlier. I think that many people in the Omaha area would recognize you as much for your music as they would for your being a professor here at UNO.
Well, you know, that happens occasionally when I'm out with the band, and I just would
you
mention.
You do have your own band these days.
Yes, I still do it. It's my alter ego, I call it. But occasionally on the weekends, I have a little 5-piece band, and people that see me in that role, they're just dumbfounded when I tell them I'm a professor at the university. And then vice versa. When I tell students, for instance, that they find out that I can play rock and roll drums, they're pretty surprised at that.
Well, they might not be so surprised if your department were music, but when your department's criminal justice, that's a little
They ask me, what
different.
department are you in? And I say criminal justice. But it's been a wonderful outlet for me all my life, and I don't regret anything to do with music. And I'm just very fortunate that I can still produce music. It's been a great part of my life, a real passion in my life. And it paid for my graduate studies, so that helped a lot.
Well, let's go back to talking about your studies. You got a bachelor's degree here at what was then Omaha University?
Yes, bachelor's degree.
Municipal University of Omaha.
Right, it actually says Omaha University on it. So
that was back in
1965. Right, and then, as I said, I might just interject that when I graduated in '65, I left. We used to have graduations in the Kanikata field, right on the field in June. And I tore off my robe and got in a band bus, and we went on the road, and I was playing with a band, and we traveled all over the Midwest. We went to Chicago and Minneapolis and all these places. And it was that experience, which was wonderful. I enjoyed the experience, but it was that experience that really showed me that I wanted to go on to school. We used to travel to these cities, and I enjoyed the performing, etc., but on breaks, and you get to know people, I found that the conversations took one of 2 or 3 tacks. They either were about cars, sports, or some other topic, and I thought there has to be more in life than that. And I decided to go back to graduate school. And I looked around and I saw a lot of 55-year-old professors, very few 55-year-old drummers. So I thought, well, in terms of the long haul, I think I'd rather go that direction. That's how I decided to come back to graduate school and pursue my master's. And then I went on and taught and decided to pursue a PhD. And I received my PhD from South Dakota State in Brookings in sociology, and my major area was criminology and deviance.
Well, now you said you started out on your bachelor's degree with a music scholarship.
Right.
So your major was obviously music.
It was music.
Then, right? But then you switched over.
I switched over. As I said, I started to take the psychology courses. I really enjoyed those, and I took some sociology courses from a fellow named Dr. George Helling, who was the chair of the social department at that time. Phil Vogt, you might remember that name. And enjoyed those. And I realized I was accumulating so many hours in these areas that I could pursue that, so I went on to major in those 2 areas also, and just kind of filled up my program that way.
And then you got so interested, I guess, that you went on for that master's degree you just mentioned.
Right, and during the time that I was working on my master's, part of my master's practicum was to work at the Youth Detention Center here in Omaha. And I worked as a counselor there. And I really enjoyed that work, working with the young people that were in crisis. But it felt as if I could not have as much impact as I might have in the classroom, because we would be teaching people that we're going to go out and have an impact on the system and can produce some change, hopefully. And change was a big, change agent was a big word in the 60s, of course. So that's why I went back to teaching and to pursue my doctorate, because I feel I enjoy being in the classroom immensely. I still do, after all these years. I still
so right after your master's degree, you went to Dana, as you
went to Dana and
right?
taught there, and then started working in the summers on the doctorate, and then I took a year's residency in Brookings.
How did you happen to pick South Dakota State?
That was quite interesting. Actually, I knew I wanted to stay in the Midwest, and so I'd written to Iowa State, Colorado, Kansas, and they all expressed an interest in having me come there. And somebody told me about a program in South Dakota State. I'd not really even heard of it. And so I wrote to the chairman up there, and in this day and age, he sent me back a handwritten note, which you rarely get anymore, instead of a form letter, and said, please come up and see us. So I did. I got in the car and drove to Brookings and talked with the department. It was a small department, and they were very flexible in letting you construct and design your own program. And that appealed to me. And they offered me an assistantship there, a research assistantship. And so I said, let's do it. And I went there, and I have never regretted. Wonderful program. Not, you know, no big national reputation, but certainly very solid sociology program. So I enjoyed that very much.
And so you said you started there off and on while you were
at Dana, yes.
Dana, right. And you
took some
were
courses.
in Dana from the time you got your master's degree around
1967.
Yeah,
right.
Until the early 70s.
Till 1973. And wonderful school. In your mind's eye, that's what a college should look like. It sits way on a hill overlooking the Missouri River Valley with the village below it, and buildings with ivy on the walls, and it was a wonderful first.
They must have been sorry to lose you back then.
Well, it was, I enjoyed the experience greatly. It was very small. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I pretty much was the sociology department, which was good in some respects, but you taught so many courses, and I'm sure you've had others on this program that will tell you about your early years. And I taught 5 courses the first semester, no repeats, and 4 different ones the second semester. So that was a challenge. But I enjoyed teaching there, and I think the small school experience is a great one. But this was home. Getting an opportunity to come back to UNO was wonderful for me, and I've enjoyed it.
Tell me about that. How did that happen that you ended up coming here? As so often occurs, it was a happenstance, and I happened to be in Omaha for a weekend. I think it was spring break or something like that, and I stopped at the university, and I bumped into a fellow named Vince Webb, and he and I had been classmates here at UNO. He was new to the criminal justice department, and Professor Kuchel was the chair at that time. And he said, how are you doing in your PhD up there? He'd just completed his. And I said, well, fine, I'll be done here this summer. And he said, any interest in coming here? Just over a cup of coffee. And I said, well, yes, that'd be wonderful. Applied, and they hired me in 1974, the fall of 1974. And I started teaching here. And I've been here ever since. It's amazing. I look around, and I just am amazed that I'm still here doing this. Now, when you were in graduate school, did you pursue a traditional sociology program, or how did you get into the field of criminal justice?
Well, it was a very traditional program, and I think that that's one of the reasons, as I mentioned, that I was attracted to the South Dakota State program, in that they let you design a specialty area, and so my interest was in criminology and deviance, and so they let me design a track that would lead to that end, and in terms of directed readings and independent study courses, this type of thing. They didn't have a lot of courses in it, but they allowed me the flexibility to work with professors and work independently, and I think that attracted me. And since I had worked in a youth detention center, I knew that was an area that I wanted to go toward, the criminal justice system, society's response to crime, and this opportunity was great to come to a new program at that time.
And at that time, it was not just new here, but it was new in the country. Wasn't
Exactly. Relatively new field, and a lot at that time. In fact, they originally started out being called law enforcement sciences, and it was a lot of retired police officers and law enforcement officers that would go into the academia to teach after they had finished a career with law enforcement. And the other thing that attracted me too, Jack, was that Vince said that we were well on our way to establishing a PhD program. And that was very attractive to me. It would be the first one at UNO. Well, this was 1974.
25 years later.
25. And I thought, well, this will be wonderful. I'll get to work in a PhD program. They had a master's program. And we eventually did get the PhD program in 1995. So it took a while, but we did end up with it. And we were the first PhD granting program on the UNO campus. And now public administration has one, of course. And
independent program.
Independent program, certainly.
I'm trying to remember, but it seems to me that back in those days, in the middle 70s, criminal justice program had a fairly large federal grant, didn't they, to get started?
We were part of what they called a consortium. There were 6 universities across the nation, and there was a grant to establish criminal justice higher education, and that allowed us to do the luxury of developing a program, bringing in a lot of scholars and professors of the more traditional type versus the practitioners. And that was the impetus to really put us on our way.
And I think it gave you initially some kind of a national reputation in that you were able to get a grant like that.
Well, thank you. We like to think that it did, and that certainly provided the resources to be able to attract the kind of people that would develop. And we've been fortunate in the Criminal Justice Department to retain people over years. Case in point, we have several of us that have been there for many, many years, well over 20 years. And I think that kind of continuity in developing a program really adds to the substance of the program and the success of the program. So we've been very fortunate in that, with that development anyway.
Well, tell me, you came to Omaha University, or as an undergraduate. It became University of Nebraska at Omaha. You returned here after you finished your doctoral degree to become a professor, assistant professor here. Tell me what it was like back then. Can you?
How far back?
Well, go back to when you first came here, and then what was the difference between? Did you notice any difference between 1961 and 1974?
Yeah, in 1961 I paid $7 an hour for tuition.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Any students listening to this would go like this: $7 a credit hour for tuition. And but back then we had a different sort of set of problems. The #1 problem on campus in 1961 was parking. See how things have changed? It's just amazing, isn't it? But it was. The #1 problem was parking, and some things never change, I guess. But it was a very small campus, obviously. At the time, we didn't have all of the lovely buildings we have now. And just to be able to see these changes over the years. And, of course, the change in administration. It was a municipal university. Dr. Mabel L, and I'm sure others have talked to you about Dr. Bale. He was a wonderful man. I happened to know him as a student, because I was highly involved.
Well, that's good. Give us a student's perspective on Dr. Bale. We've had many faculty perspectives on him in this interview series.
Well, it was really quite an exciting time for the university. Dr. Bale ran the place with a very tight ship attitude, and it ran very well at that time, even from the student perspective.
Given his limited budget, he just about had to run it that way. Some people don't understand that.
Right, that's very true.
Because it sometimes wasn't very pleasant.
He was a very, very fair man from a student standpoint. If there was any kind of issue that arose, that he would look at all sides of it. He was decisive. Obviously, he would make a decision, and he would stick with it. And the students knew this. They would test him, and I happened to be on the student council and a couple of other activities on the campus, and so I did get to work with him quite a bit. And Don Flaster was the dean of students at that time. There's another name out of the past, isn't it? And we worked together quite well. And I'm trying to think of the registrar that we had in those days. Oh boy, this is terrible. I won't do this on TV, but if it comes to me, I will think of it. But and he worked with the students a great deal, but Dr. Bale...
Virgil Sharp was registrar.
He was registrar, and the fellow that followed him, and we have a scholarship in his name now, this fellow that he was died of a heart attack a few years ago, but I'm really blocking on the name of him.
Bill...
Gerbrocht.
Gerbrocht.
That's who it was, and he worked with us, and he was a French teacher. That was his
really?
background. I don't know if you knew that about
I didn't know
Bill.
that
Yes.
about Bill. I thought I knew him fairly well.
Well,
but I
as
never
a
knew he
student,
was
we
a
got
French
to know him, and he was a French teacher before he became an administrator, and a wonderful man. And he really treated the students well. But it was a very small, intimate campus. I think the total population was about 6,000, and almost evenly divided between night and day students. And
Yes, the slogan used to be the busiest night spot in town.
right.
Remember that?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. I haven't heard that one in a long time.
I've often thought we should revive that.
That's a good one. I hadn't heard that one for a long time.
Yeah.
But and basically we had the student center, and we have what is now the administration building, was the library. And that was basically the building you used to get from the student center to the administration building, to walk through it like that as a student.
Right.
And it was also a social center. If you wanted to meet people, you met them in the library. And now it's a little bit different. We have this beautiful library here on campus, which is, I think, a wonderful institution. And they do some really good work over there. But it was, the sports were big at that time, actually, and I was in the band, of course, so I tell people I got to play in all the football games. I just don't tell them I was in the band. And I went to the one and only bowl game we ever went to, the All Sports Bowl. Well, prior to that was the Tangerine Bowl in 1954, but which my sister went to, but she was a student out here. But so it was a different time. And then when we got to the master's level, and things started changing, they started to agitate to get into the state system. And they actually recruited a lot of the students to go out and knock on doors and campaign. So I did that to get us...
Did you get involved? There was, before that, in Dr. Bale's day in the early 60s, a campaign to raise the taxes, raise the mill levy in Omaha. Did you get involved in that?
They recruited all of us, the active students, and we did things of that nature, right? I just think you thought you were doing one more student activity. I'm not sure we all totally comprehended what was going on, but
well, mill levy was defeated twice.
We didn't do a very good job, didn't we?
But that was the impetus for becoming part of the state university,
exactly,
I think, in order to get enough financial support to continue on with what we were doing.
Very true.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what your department was like when you first came here 25 years ago or so.
We were, first of all, physically, we were located in the annexes on the east side of the campus.
Tell me what the annexes are.
Those were the temporary buildings that were located in the parking lot on the east side of the administration. They were corrugated buildings, and they had offices in them. And the first year was the year that, of course, that we had the tornado of 1975. And do you remember that?
Yes.
Because I have a story to tell about your department on that. Was sitting, it was in May, of course, and I was correcting papers, and they said there's going to be a tornado heading our way. Go to the administration building and go in the boiler room. So we went down there. Well, there happened to be some graduate psychology student down there who had read someplace that in crisis you do things. And a student had trying to get all these professors and people in the dark singing rounds and playing games. I think she was carrying out one of her experiments in the psychology class on crowd behavior. But so that was, we moved from the annexes then to the annexes on the west side, one of the buildings, one of the homes that they had bought. And that one's since gone, been torn down. And we moved various annexes. And it seems like every time we move into one, they tear it down. And the last one we were in was Annex 26, which is now where the village is, the dorms. And we're located now in Durham Science, where the offices that IS&T formerly occupied until they moved to the South Campus.
Yeah, the computer science people were there, and now they've moved to the new building.
And we are located in, eventually, this building is to be our home.
The old engineering building, right?
Eventually, they tell us.
Right. So as the funds come to renovate.
Exactly, right. But we are, from that standpoint, the physical part of it, that was kind of the shift that we went through. As a faculty, we had a good, solid faculty, heavily weighted on behavioral directions, criminology, juvenile delinquency, more the behavioral side of it, more criminological. Then we started to add more people that were more from the system side. and as the program developed. And currently we have 24 full-time faculty. And also, I think as you're aware, we're located on 2 campuses. We have a presence in Lincoln. And administratively, our program is operated out of Omaha, but we have about 5 or 6 faculty that are full-time located in Lincoln. And that's a very large program in Lincoln, lots of students, lots of majors. And so it's a very large, diverse faculty, which I think has been our strength.
What sorts of specialties are represented? Are people mostly from sociology the way they were originally, or are there
That's changed quite a bit, Jack. Over the years, more programs in criminal justice began to develop and turn out PhDs in criminal justice. And so little by little, the behavioral types, the criminology types, have shifted over to more of the criminal justice types. So we have a nice balance now. And we have people that have strong interests in police research and law enforcement, people that are very strong in criminal procedure and the court process, and then several people, including myself, that teach a lot of the courses on the correctional system. Plus then the types of criminology and juvenile delinquency, the behavioral types, terrorism, organized crime, these types of courses. So it's a very balanced program, and we have a lot of nationally known scholars in our program with very well thought of national reputations in our field. So we're very fortunate from that standpoint. It's been fun to watch it, from the young faculty member to one of the old guys, and watch the young ones come up.
Well, it was, as you mentioned earlier, I think it was a brand new program when you came here. It's started, of course, in the College of Arts and Sciences, in the sociology department. And I think you mentioned Pete Kuchel as being one of the originators of the program.
He was my advisor, and I took several courses in sociology, and he taught 2 or 3 of the criminology and penology courses.
And then in the early 70s, probably what, 72 or something like that,
right about in there,
split off from sociology and became part of the new, well, it was originally a school, the School of Public Affairs and Community Service.
That's right.
And then became the College of Public Affairs and Community Service.
Now called CPACs.
Right.
But yes, that's true. You've done your homework. You know, of course, you were here when all this was happening. Yeah, that's right. But soon we would like to see. We have been working toward becoming a school of criminal justice. So we're working toward that end also. And so it's been quite a ride, quite a career, and I don't regret any of it. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being at UNO, and it's been a good career.
What are the courses that you're teaching these days?
Well, it's just so often happens, as a former dean, you know that once you get to this level, they kick all of us old profs up to teach the upper level courses. So I teach mostly graduate courses now. And I teach a lot of the courses in the correctional area, community-based corrections, institutional corrections, and occasionally a criminology-based course, which I used to teach quite a bit at the undergraduate level. And also I do have the one course on international criminal justice, the comparative criminal justice systems course, that involves the trip we've done for many years to England. And so
let's talk about that for a minute. That always has seemed very interesting to me.
We don't have any trouble getting me to talk about that.
Right, you started that way back when you first came here.
Well, it was actually started by a fellow named Jim Kane in 1972, and he took 10 students to London. And they visited several of the criminal justice agencies. Then in the mid-1970s when I came, I joined him. And we continued to do this. We used to go at Christmas time. We used to leave the day after Christmas.
Yeah, I remember that.
And come back the day before second semester. The last time we did that was 1980, I believe, 1981, something like that, because when we returned, we were in a blizzard in Chicago. We sat on the runway for about 2 hours because the doors were frozen shut to our airplane. And Jim and I looked at each other and thought, you know, maybe we should move this trip to May. That sounds like a good time. So now we do go in May. And the program has grown. Unfortunately, Jim passed away in 1991, and I was faced with the decision whether to carry it on or maybe not carry it on. But I decided that I would like to continue doing that.
Well, what do you do? What do the students do on this trip?
Well, this is actually a course as part of our curriculum, CJ 480. We start meeting in January. It's a regular course like any other class, and we meet each week, and we have lectures, a textbook, we have films, tests, all of these things, comparing the English criminal justice system to the American criminal justice system, because our system derived from the English system of common law. Just the one big difference is we take this big field trip, and Monday after school's out in May, we meet at Epley, and we take a plane over to London. And we stay for about 15 days. And during that time, we actually experience and see all the things we've been studying. We go to the police training college. We go on the beat with the bobbies. We go to the courts where they wear the white wigs and the black robes, and we observe cases. We talk with barristers. We actually visit maximum security prisons. We go inside, take tours of the maximum security prisons. We spend some time with the juvenile bureau in one of the highest crime rate regions of London. So we do a lot of activities. Each day they have a scheduled activity. And it's like you move the campus to London. And we stay in a very nice hotel. It's right in Russell Square, right around the corner from the British Museum. And it's very centrally located. And so we do these activities during the day. But the other, we have two areas of focus for us. One is academic, obviously. The second one is that we want the students to become exposed to another culture, another society. And I know you've had Tom Gutierrez on here before, and I support that international learning aspect, obviously, over all these years. So we give them a lot of free time to explore the culture, sightsee, get to meet the people. Their evenings are free. And we give them one long weekend, and a lot of the students get a chance to travel. And they'll take that opportunity to visit France, Ireland, Scotland. We had some go to Germany last year. So it's really quite an experience for the students from middle of the United States, Omaha, Nebraska, into the very cosmopolitan portions of Western Europe. And they take tests, they write journals, they do all of the normal things for any traditional class. It's just we have this experiential learning component.
Over the years, you must have become very well acquainted with the criminal justice system in England.
Well, we have, and it's been...
And probably met some people there that you see every year.
Well, we have some wonderful friends over there, and I look forward to seeing them each year. People will say to me, Bill, how can you do this every year? You know, and I look forward to seeing my friends now from England, and I think I was chatting with you earlier. I actually met a police officer my first trip, got to know him fairly well, and about 2 or 3 years later he called me and he said, my daughter wants to come to America to go to school, can you help her? And I said, certainly. And so she came over. Well, now she's my wife. And he is my father-in-law. So that was an interesting circumstance, but it's worked out wonderful. And I do look forward to seeing the friends each year over there.
Great.
And the students, I think, have quite an experience, something they'll never forget the rest of their life. And a lot of interesting stories over the year. That's my one plan when I actually finally retire. I hate to even say that word. I want to write. I've kept notes over all these years, and I want to write something of that experience. I've done an academic book on England.
Was back published just a few years ago, Criminal Justice in England and the United States. Is that
yes, with a fellow named David Herschel, who is from London, and he received his degree at Cambridge, and he teaches in the United States. And I teach in the United States and teach in England. So we decided to collaborate on a book comparing the two systems. And because as we started to teach this class, there really weren't any textbooks for what we were doing. So I just said, why don't we write one? So that's how we did that. But I would like to write more of a memoirs book on these experiences in England.
Well, I understand that you're going to do a television documentary on your next trip to England.
This started to form in my mind about a year ago, and I thought, obviously, I can't do this forever. And I thought I would like to have some record of this experience, that someday, as they're watching Reflections in Time, 50 years from now, they'll say, didn't they used to have a London program? So I thought, well, I could write another book, but we've already done that. And I thought, why not a video chronology of it? So we've obtained the cooperation, as they always are cooperative here at the University Television Studios, and have retained a young man that's a student and also a professional videographer for one of the local TV stations. And he's going to go with us and shadow us and actually chronicle the entire experience. And then when we get back, we'll edit it, write a script, and narrate it, so that we actually have a product, a visual chronology of this experience. And we're going to try to do it as open and free as possible. We'll have a lot of interviews with the students about their expectations. We've already started filming in the classroom, so they don't know what to expect yet. And then we'll film them on the plane. We'll film them when we arrive, and we hope to do a lot of kind of interesting things with this tape.
Yeah, that sounds as though it would be something that a lot of people would enjoy watching. I know I would.
Hope so. Yes, I'd
learn more about what's going on and learn more about the English criminal justice system as it compares with ours. One
of the things we've also done with it, Jack, is to include, it's expanded so much from the original 10 students. Last May I took 100, and so it's grown considerably. And we now include students from, we have students from Lincoln, Kearney, Chadron, all across the state. And the students from the western part of the state meet us in Chicago, and then we go over together and carry out this. So it is, the logistics of it have
Yeah, I was thinking
ballooned.
The logistics of 100 people is a lot different than that for 10
That's why I have all this light-colored hair, Jack. But yes, and so I'm very fortunate. I have 4 assistants, 2 other professors that go with us, and a graduate assistant. And this year we're also taking a group of students from the communications department. Dr. Criss Allen will be accompanying that, and they kind of go off and do their own thing. And a business class from Chadron is going to join us, and they'll go do their thing. Now, we do the sightseeing things and activities together, but during the day, during class times, they will be off pursuing their own interests. And because we've grown so large, we no longer can do anything together once we get there. So at any one time, we'll have maybe 3 to 4 groups of my students, of 10, 15, 20, whatever it might be, off. One will be at a prison, another will be at the police station, another will be doing some other activity, and then in the afternoon we'll cross and do the other half of that activity, because and so that it requires a lot of planning, a great deal of planning.
Have you ever talked about doing any sort of reciprocal visits where you'd have English students coming over here?
Frequently. We mention that all the time. There is something to the fact that, well, if they're going to come to America, they want to go to Orlando, not Omaha. But we have occasionally, we've had particularly, we've had officials from the criminal justice system come to Omaha to speak, and some of the friends we've met over the years, and that's been, we've had a magistrate visit, chief constables, other professors, but rarely do we get the students to come over, come on to Omaha.
But, you know, in many ways, I think that would probably be more instructive for them, because everybody tends to visit the big cities on the coast.
Well, look at us. We went to London, not to Nottingham or Newcastle on Tyne. We go to London to visit England, and so they're going to come to America and visit. You know, the places they've heard about, New York and
I suppose
Florida.
That in terms of the specialty you're interested in, criminal justice, that there's more to be seen in a big city than there is in a small
Well, sure,
town.
there are a lot more resources and opportunities. I mean, the East Coast, you have the FBI academies out on the East Coast, and a lot of different things that they could see. But we've tried many times to get them to come to Omaha.
But I have, I've worked, as I think you know, with international studies quite extensively, and we've had student groups here in Omaha that I think have really benefited from the experience. I've taken groups of students, for example, on a summer tour of this area in Nebraska, South Dakota, a little bit in Colorado, and Wyoming, and they get to see something of the American West that they wouldn't see in Los Angeles or New York.
That's an excellent point. 2 years ago, I had 2 officials from the Metropolitan Police. One's at Scotland Yard, and another one was from the City of London Police come. And as part of, they spoke here on UNO's campus, and I showed them around. They wanted to go to one of our Native American areas, because to them, in England, that was what they'd heard about America. And then later on, we took them to Chadron to speak also. And we'd left Chadron. We were going to go to Mount Rushmore. They'd always heard about that. We were pulling out of Chadron, and if you've ever been in that part of the state of Nebraska,
that's one of the places we took, taken students.
That highway between Chadron and Rapid City, it can get fairly lonely out there. And all of a sudden, this high-ranking official from the police department says, "Stop the car." Well, we didn't know what was going on, and we pulled over. And he says, "I have to take a picture of this." And he took 4 pictures, north, east, west, and south. He said, "They won't believe me in England that I can point my camera in 4 different directions and not see a single person." And I said, "Well, you are out here in the West."
I've had exactly that same experience with students from Japan who you know, were also from a crowded island. And it's, you just don't believe that.
We take it for granted, I think, in Nebraska, that we can drive out of Omaha and see the wide open spaces. And they don't get that. They certainly don't.
Let's go back to your teaching for just a moment. I remember one of the things that you were involved in early on. In fact, you mentioned it being involved in it as an undergraduate student, but I think you also got involved in it as an instructor, is an internship program.
Yes, in the early part of the first few years that I came to UNO, I'd had such a good experience doing something like that, and we didn't have a program at that time. So I talked with Vince Webb, the chair at the time, and asked if we could begin one. And so we did develop an internship program. And it's a fairly developed program now. We have it both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. It's a different kind of experience for graduate students. But at the undergraduate level, the students are placed in an agency, usually in and around Omaha, and it might be with the local police or the sheriff's department or the court or one of the prisons, and they work under supervision during the week, an average of about 12 hours a week. And they chronicle their activities, obviously, and we meet on campus as a group. And it gives the students an opportunity to get some practical experience before they graduate. And we feel this is important.
That's always struck me as a really good thing to do. I know a number of programs in the campus. Communication department, for example, is a very active. And always
we allow them to take it twice, so they can actually get a full year's experience. So when they apply for a job later on, the person might say, "Well, do you have any experience?" And you can say, "Yes, I worked for a year in the homicide division of the Omaha Police Department," or "I worked with the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people doing undercover surveillance." You know. And so that the employer can then get some sense that they've had some practical experience, as well as the book learning inside the classroom.
Does this sometimes lead to jobs for the students? Do
Frequently.
People where they work want to have them continue?
And the best part, as you know, the best part is so many of those interns are now in positions of administrative positions in the agencies, and so they're very supportive of the activity. Rather than just sharpen the pencils and make the coffee, they know how important it is to involve the students in the workings of the agency. Obviously, some things they're not going to be able to be involved in just due to liability concerns, etc. But
you mentioned being an intern as an undergraduate in the detention center. Do you have interns working down there?
Yes. And the fellow who's running it is a former intern of ours. So.
What sort of things do they do down there? You mentioned being a counselor. Is that the
during the when I was there, that's what I did. Primarily, I was a graduate student, so they allowed us to do. I did some research projects for them and counseling, and you did a little of everything. At the undergraduate level, you will work as probably one of the resident counselors because it is a residential facility, and you'll work with the clients. In whatever their needs are. At the detention center, they have to have an accredited Omaha Public School classroom, and they have inside the detention center, so that for those under the age of 16 who are required to still be in school, they don't interrupt their education. And so I even taught 8th grade algebra one time. That was a stretch. You know, they asked me to fill in one day in the classroom, and how long ago did you teach 8th grade algebra, or whatever it was, freshman algebra? But so you did a lot of things, but we try to keep the students involved on a weekly basis, and we like to have them there that full semester, not just a couple of weeks of observation. We want them to become an integral part of the agency, and the agencies begin to depend on them. they can carry out a lot of activities with tight budgets nowadays.
Sure.
Here's a real good source of help for them.
Well, let's see. What things haven't we talked about? We haven't talked about, I think, some of the other things you do on the campus here. Oh, one thing I do want to mention. I'm sure you are too modest to mention it yourself, but you have talked about your enjoyment of teaching, and that got rewarded some years ago with being named one of the or being awarded, I guess, the Excellence in Teaching Award.
That probably has the most meaning for me of anything in my career, because it came from the students. Yeah, I was nominated by a student.
Yeah, for the benefit of our audience, that award is given annually to, well, to the best teachers on the campus.
Yes, there are usually one or two that are given each year, and I'm very humbled by that, but very gratified.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed receiving that reward. In fact, I remember you were there when I got it, and we talked about that here. I'd been one of your students, and then I'd managed to receive that award.
That's really great.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I even brought my mother to the breakfast. She was very proud of me.
And then currently, a lot of people would know you as the faculty academic representative to the NCAA.
This has been something that I've really enjoyed. It's only been 2 years.
Have you been a sports enthusiast for
all my life?
Years?
I've been very highly involved in sports, both as a participant and
of course now we have a
record.
Division I sport in hockey.
We have Division I hockey, and about 2.5 to 3 years ago, someone nominated me for this position. It became open because Dick Flynn was leaving the university. He'd been for 11 years, I think, or something.
That's Dr. Flynn, who was the Dean of the College of Education
that's
here
right.
until he left a few years ago to become a college president.
Just parenthetically, I saw him 2 weeks ago at the NCAA meetings in Florida, right? But I hadn't really thought about it too much. I've always been enthusiastic about sports and play a lot of sports. But I thought to myself, well, you know, at this point in my career, I've done about as much damage to my department as I could do, so maybe I could expand. And it was something that I had some concerns about, because as a traditional academic, and you and I chatted about this briefly, we talked about Fran Hurst, a former faculty member in your department in psychology, highly involved with the athletic department when I was a student. But there had been sort of this stereotypical image of the student athlete on a campus as maybe getting a free ride, and I had all of these predispositions, and I've gotten into this position, and I work with the athletic department. I'm sort of the liaison between the faculty and the athletic department, and I've discovered a tremendous difference in the things that I had thought were accurate, which are not. The student athletes are doing a wonderful job of studying. And I just, to boast a little bit on their behalf, they had a cumulative GPA last semester of 3.1.
That's
UNO.
Very
That's
high.
all athletes. Yes. We had 98 students on the dean's list, student athletes. That's out of about 365 athletes. That's tremendous. The volleyball team alone had a 3.7 GPA, which these were new things to me, and I've enjoyed very much working with the student athletes and the coaches, and getting to know them in the athletic department, and so it's been. I've really enjoyed it. It's so different than what I do on a daily basis that it has really been quite rewarding for me. So I have enjoyed that part.
Are there many student athletes who are CJ majors?
We have a few. The captain of the hockey team is one of our majors, Jason Cupp, and last year Jeff Edwards was. And as you mentioned, hockey, putting the Division I sport in it has really, that's just raised the level of excitement around the entire athletic department. And they're doing quite well. Our football team won the conference, the volleyball team won the conference, and the soccer team won the conference for fall sports. That's really quite an accomplishment. And to keep their grades up like that, it's just amazing. So it has been...
well, it must be a lot of fun for you, too.
It's very enjoyable. It's time-consuming. I had no idea, because there are a lot of meetings and things that you are involved with. But from that standpoint, the meetings are enjoyable, and you get, as I said, get to work with the student athletes in the department.
Let's see, you do a number of other things too. I've seen you as faculty advisor for Omicron Delta Kappa, the student leadership honorary.
Yes, that's been...
I was faculty advisor for that for a few years myself.
Oh, were you?
So I know
Great. That's been very enjoyable, because these are the top students from a leadership standpoint and an academic standpoint too. Their scholarship has to be top notch to even be selected for it. So these are type A students. These are the young people that are charging forward. They have great grades and they're highly involved in the campus. And I was fortunate enough to be initiated when I was a student in ODK, and then to now be able to come back and work with them as a faculty advisor. It's been quite enjoyable. And I also serve as a student, or the advisor for our criminal justice student organization. And
is that a very active organization?
They're fairly active, yes. We got to thinking many years ago that we have all these majors, and the only time they see each other is sitting next to each other in a class after they fought for a parking place out in the parking lot. And so maybe we could have an organization that would enhance their degree at UNO. So they meet on a monthly basis, and they carry out activities that are kind of supplement what they get in the classroom. They take tours of prisons. 2 weeks ago, some of them went to Kansas City to do ride-alongs with the Kansas City police, and quite an eye-opening experience. They have workshops on how to write a good resume and how to interview for a job. So things that they might not get in the classroom. And they help with our career day, which is a huge operation in criminal justice. Each year we put on a career day, and we have over 56, 60 agencies that come to UNO. And we assemble them all in one room, and the students get to go around and chat with them about a future career.
And I think you've been elected to at least one 3-year term on the Faculty Senate, haven't you? Maybe?
Yes, I was on the Faculty Senate, and it was enjoyable. In fact, I was on the Faculty Senate when we hired Del Weber. And so that was a tremendous experience, getting to know Del his first year in as Chancellor. And of course, he had a very distinguished career as Chancellor and has left his mark on this campus for sure. But that, through the Faculty Senate, I was able to get to work with him on some of the initial projects.
Great.
I enjoyed that very much.
And off campus, you're pretty active too. I seem to remember working with the 4th Judicial District of the Iowa Department of Corrections.
Yes, they have started a drug court. This is a new thing in the United States. And drug courts are for people that are having substance abuse problems and have been charged with a crime related to drugs. And it involves intensive treatment as opposed to incarceration. Well, this is a big undertaking. This involves quite a conceptual shift from what we traditionally think of when somebody commits a crime. And so this is intensive treatment for drug offenders. And so they've received money from the state, obviously, to develop this program. Well, anytime you have that involved, it needs to be evaluated, hopefully by an outside agency. And so they've retained me to myself and a graduate student, one of our PhD students, and we do 3 components. We do the process evaluation and the outcomes evaluation, and then the cost-benefit analysis for this court. And it's on an ongoing basis.
That started fairly recently?
A year ago, 2 weeks ago, January of 2000. And the program is usually a 2-year program for these clients. If they complete the program successfully, then their possible prison sentence is waived. And so they have a big carrot out there, a big incentive to complete this program. So that's been fascinating. We actually have 3 drug courts in this metropolitan area. Douglas County has one, and another one of our professors is the evaluator for that program. And then Sarpy County has a juvenile drug court, and one of our professors is doing evaluation. So it's a unique opportunity to observe and evaluate these programs, particularly from a scientific standpoint.
And I'm sure you learned something from it, too.
Right, and then we can do research in and around these 3 programs. So this has been a tremendous exercise. I've really enjoyed it. It was something, again, new and innovative in the field. And I guess at this point in our careers, we're always looking for something new and innovative. And
well, we have a few minutes left, not too many, but I'd like to spend a little bit of time just reminiscing with you about, we've already talked about some of the people you've known. Could we continue on that vein a little bit? You talked about Mabel L earlier. You've mentioned a number of other people along the way. Anybody you'd like to, that you feel has had a particular influence on you or your department or the university as a whole that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think over the years there have been several. I mentioned Pete Kuchel.
Yes.
He's an emeritus professor in our department and founded the department. Known Pete as an undergraduate student, then as a colleague, and now as a friend. And I think that's one of the highest compliments you can pay to somebody, if you can follow their life that way and look at the influence they had. So if Pete founded the program, there have been many people along the way that have really been responsible. I think of some of my colleagues, Dr. Sam Walker. I think you may know Dr. Walker, and he and I argue frequently over who has the seniority, and he has a week more than I do, I believe. And so we've watched this program.
He's another person in the department with a marvelous national reputation.
Recognized all over the United States. And he's been a good friend over the years, and we've been able to work side by side and see the program develop. And Dr. Julie Horney, who's currently on sabbatical to Cambridge, has had, she's another recognized scholar. Dr. Cassie Spahn in our programs won the Creativity Scholarship Award. She's won the Great Teacher Award, just a tremendous colleague and asset to our department. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that's been part of the reason for some of our success is that the continuity over time. These people, we all came together as new, young, untenured assistant professors, and we've stayed and watched the program grow. So it's just been so exciting, and it's been a wonderful career. I think academia, there was a time, Jack, and I didn't mention this earlier, that I thought I would go into business when I finished my degree. I thought I would go to the corporate world, public relations or something, which might seem fit me, but I wouldn't trade academia for anything. It's been a wonderful career, and the people you meet along the way, and the idea that you hope that you can have some influence on the younger people coming through, on your students, has just been really gratifying to me over the years.
Well, I'm sure you have had that kind of influence, because even
no, you hope so.
well, you just mentioned, for example, that a number of your students, former students, now head up departments or various activities in the...
In fact, I just received an email out of the blue yesterday from a student. He was my graduate assistant in 1980. 1980, and the internet's a wonderful thing, and he found our website and found my picture still there in the website. So he emailed, and he's chief of police out in Colorado now, and for one of the suburbs of Denver. And he's had a tremendous career, finished his master's degree, and went on, and now the commander, as he said, of the police department.
That's always nice to have students
like to hear
who do well.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, we're very close to the end of our hour here, and I want to thank you very much for joining us. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today in a visit with Dr. Bill Wakefield, who's a longtime professor of criminal justice here at UN Omaha. We've been taking a look at some of the history of UN Omaha as seen through the eyes of the history makers, and we've interviewed one of the history makers today. So this is Jack Newton inviting you to join us again in the series we call Reflections in Time.
Reflections in Time is made possible in part by support from the UNO Alumni Association, fostering a legacy of alumni giving since 1913.